In a win for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, Ilhan Omar has won her primary race in Minnesota's 5th District. Omar is a member of the Squad, a group of liberal House members who have been vocal in their opposition to Israel's handling of the war in Gaza. 2 Squad members were ousted this year after pro-Israel groups spent heavily against them. The Hill White House columnist Niall Stanage joins us to discuss. Niall, those pro-Israel groups stayed out of this race. Is that why she was able to keep her seat?
I think it's part of the reason, though I also think her strength within that district could be one of the reasons why they stayed out. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. But certainly those groups affiliated with AIPAC spent very large sums of money, more than $8 million against Cori Bush, even more than that against Jamal Bowman. As you noted, Drew, they stayed out here, and Congresswoman Omar coasted to really a pretty comfortable victory, a much bigger victory than she had won against the same rival just 2 years ago.
It might be argued that this actually shows the strength of AIPAC and its allies because they stayed out of this race and she was able to win.
Well, I think that they are eager to use their money and muscle where they think it will work, and not eager to do so if they would face defeat. Now, as I say, you can argue which direction the cause and effect runs, but clearly Congresswoman Omar has been one of the strongest voices against Israel's actions in Gaza, and she has been rewarded, at least by the voters in her district, with this 13-point margin of a victory.
After facing attacks over his military service, Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz is pushing back. Some Republicans have accused Walz of abandoning his unit before it deployed to Iraq in 2005. Now, it's interesting, different members of that unit have very different opinions of Walz's departure. Tell us about that, and what is Walz saying in response?
Yeah, that's right, Drew. There is some genuine cloudiness over this. The issue really is that the governor left the National Guard unit a short time before it was deployed, as you say, to Iraq. And the issue is, did he know that they were going to be deployed? There is, I think, general agreement that they had not got any official notice of deployment. But the question is, did he make a decision unrelated to that he wanted to do other things, or did he see a deployment coming down the pike and decided to drop out at that stage?
And it seems like Walz kind of wants to stay above the fray, thanking members of the military for their service, saying he's proud of his, but not really wanting to dive deep into the details of what you just talked about.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, he talked just on Tuesday about the need to honour people's service and honour people's sacrifice, whatever form that service took. I think, you know, there are dangers for him in getting into the weeds. The Harris campaign has said that he misspoke in one quote where he talked about carrying weapons of war in war. He never, in fact, served in that kind of combat role. So these are the kind of disputes that I think he understandably doesn't have much appetite to get into.
Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris is riding a wave of positive poll numbers and impressive fundraising into the Democratic National Convention. But Democratic strategists are warning of danger on the horizon. Harris will soon face an onslaught of attacks from the Trump campaign, and the DNC faces challenges balancing the messages of different wings of the party. Also, Harris is facing mounting pressure to do more non-scripted interviews. Now, what do you think are the biggest threats to kill the good vibes Harris is enjoying?
So I think one is just, is there a natural momentum? Is she at a kind of a high watermark right now? Because she has had a very good few weeks. She's got a lot of very positive media coverage. Will that just sort of naturally end and taper off, particularly after the Democratic convention? The other thing that you already mentioned, Drew, was negative advertising. There's obviously going to be millions and millions of dollars spent, not only by the Trump campaign, but by conservative groups generally, to beat up her image. And that may be effective. I mean, she was not a particularly impressive candidate, to say the least, in 2020 when she sought the Democratic nomination. As for the interview question, she does face more pressure to do that. She has said that she will do an interview before the end of the month. If that just ends up a kind of standard average interview, then that's fine. But of course, the danger is that she makes some kind of misstep, some kind of mistake, and that would be a big story if it happened.
Yeah, and of course the debate too coming up, which is kind of half interview and half verbal combat, which could present some difficulties for her and some opportunities for Trump and his campaign. But Harris has actually taken on a new campaign promise: no tax on tips, stealing a page directly out of Trump's playbook. And it may be one of the few areas where both candidates seem to agree right now. How did this strategy come about from the Harris campaign? And is this a direct play to Nevada voters, one of the last battleground states where she trails and where many work in the hospitality industry and rely on tips? Also, where did Democrats come in? Were they notified of this new plan?
So it doesn't seem like anybody was really notified of this new plan. I happened to be watching that speech as it took place, and everyone was quite surprised when she made this promise to exempt those workers from taxes on tips. The presumption is that it happened in a way that was intended to sort of neutralize any advantage that Trump could wring from his very similar proposal. And to your point, yes, it's absolutely of importance that she made this speech in Las Vegas. Obviously, Nevada, a battleground state, as you said, and one where the hospitality industry is obviously massive. A lot of workers there could be impacted by this proposal if it were to go through and become law.
The United States approved a nearly $20 billion weapons sale and a major sign of its commitment to Israel. This announcement was made as international mediators are hoping to restart stalled ceasefire negotiations as soon as Thursday. But recent strikes by Israel that have killed dozens and assassinations of Hamas leaders in Lebanon and Iran have complicated the negotiations. What are Biden's chances of securing a ceasefire before leaving office?
I mean, I suppose a ceasefire could occur sometime in the next few months. I think the chances of it happening very soon are extremely limited. Of course, this gets into rather complicated ground, Drew, but basically the US laid out a proposal that it said was an Israeli proposal. The enthusiasm of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for that proposal seemed very, very limited. Now we have a suggestion that Hamas is not going to participate in peace talks this week because Hamas is arguing that they broadly accepted the Biden plan and then the Israelis changed the goalposts. Netanyahu has come under some criticism internally from people who do say he did do that, but he of course denies that and is contending that it's Hamas who are uninterested in a peace or ceasefire negotiation.
Ukrainian forces entered the Russian border region of Kursk, taking control of about 400 square miles of territory. This was a major gamble for Kyiv and has now opened a new chapter in the war. What type of blow has this been to Vladimir Putin? And is this a sign that Russia's front line is weak? Does it throw away any chance of peace talks in the near future?
So it's clearly an embarrassment to Putin. It's an embarrassment to Russian prestige. I believe this is the first time that foreign troops have actually gone across the border into Russia since the Second World War. So in that respect, it is a blow to Putin. It probably does delay any suggestion of peace talks there as well. The Russians are obviously furious that this has occurred, and so that seems to have pushed any peace plan further down the track. There is, I think, also going to be increased debate here in the US, Drew, about supplying aid to Ukraine. That's a hot button issue as it is. The suggestion has always been that those weapons were used in defense of Ukraine. Once Ukraine starts going into Russian territory, which it now has done, I think that puts a whole different component into that discussion.
All right, that's all I got. Niall Stanage, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
More fallout from the nearly 2-hour chat between Donald Trump and billionaire Elon Musk on his platform X Monday night. A Democratic organization called End Citizens United has filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission. The group alleges that the interview amounted to a virtual campaign event for the former president. They say because the event was financed by Musk's company, it falls under corporate contribution and violates campaign finance laws. It comes just hours after the United Auto Workers Union filed labor charges over some of Trump's comments during that interview and accused Trump and Musk of attempting to intimidate and threaten workers. Wisconsin primary voters rejected a pair of ballot measures Tuesday night that would have limited the governor's power to spend money without legislative approval. The Republican-held state legislature proposed the two initiatives as an added check on Democratic Governor Tony Evers and his successors. The measures made their way to the ballot after millions of dollars flowed into the state to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Critics pointed out that it would add another hurdle to distributing funds in the event of an emergency like another pandemic. The defeat of the two measures comes ahead of the election this November. It will be the first election held under new district maps that give Democrats a better opportunity to compete for a majority in the state legislature. Good news for consumers. New numbers from the Labor Department show inflation is slowing down. The Consumer Price Index showed a 2.9% annual increase in July. That's down from 3% in June and marks the first time it's fell below 3% since March of 2021. Meantime, the unemployment rate has ticked higher, jumping to 4.3% in July. All eyes are now on the Federal Reserve Board, who will meet again next month to consider lowering interest rates. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.